You wouldn't believe that those who are meant to protect its citizens are now the one taking the lives of the citizens instead. There are several of such cases, but we will be discussing about 5 distinct ones. Before we move forward, do well to subscribe to Unbelievable True Story. Quickly, let's move on. Number 1. Dwight Jeffrey Loving, the Army private who murdered for thrill. It was 1988. Dwight Loving was just 20 years old. He had a clean-shaven face, bright eyes, and the uniform of a U.S. Army private. He was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, one of the largest military bases in the world. It was supposed to be the beginning of an honorable journey. But behind the uniform, Dwight was already showing signs of trouble. He skipped duties. He lied to superiors. And worst of all, he wanted power. The kind only a gun could give. It was December 11th, 1988. A chilly Sunday night. Dwight Loving walked into the night with one thing in mind. I want to rob a cabbie. He didn't need the money. He didn't have a plan. But he wanted to kill. He called for a taxi. The driver, Christopher Fay, a 20-year-old airman on leave, was just looking to make some extra cash. They drove for a while. Then Loving told him to stop. He ordered Fay out of the cab, pulled out a pistol, and shot him in the head. Narrator: quiet, slow. No argument. No struggle. Just cold-blooded murder. Loving left him lying in the cold, took his wallet, and drove off in the taxi like nothing happened. Not even an hour later, Dwight did it again. He flagged down another taxi. This time, the driver was Bobby Sharbino, a 31-year-old father of 2. Same method. Same gun. Same end. Shot at close range. Left on the side of the road to die. 2 innocent men. Gone. Just like that. And Dwight? He went home. Ate. Slept. And showed up to work the next day like nothing happened. The next day, Loving wasn't done. He tried robbing a third taxi driver. But this time, the driver was smart. He saw the gun. Slammed on the brakes. Fought back. Loving panicked and fled. But it was too late. The driver called the police. And the hunt began. It didn't take long. The Army CID and the local police were now involved. They tracked down the cab. Pulled fingerprints. They matched. They followed the trail, and it led them to the unthinkable. A U.S. soldier. One of their own. When they arrested Dwight Loving, he didn't deny it. He laughed. He told investigators, "I did it. Because I felt like it." In 1989, Dwight Loving stood before a military court. His crimes were clear. His motive was none. No mental illness. No rage. No fear. Just thrill. Just control. Just evil. The courtroom was filled with the families of the victims. One mother wept as she looked at him. He didn't look back. The military judge sentenced him to death. One of the rare times a soldier was given the death penalty. For over 20 years, Dwight Loving sat on death row. He filed appeal after appeal. Lawyers argued he was too young. Others said it was racism. But the evidence never changed. The facts were cold and clear. And the victim stayed dead. Then, in 2017, a shocking twist. President Barack Obama, just before leaving office, commuted Dwight Loving's sentence. Instead of execution, Loving would now spend life in prison without parole. To some, it was justice. To others, mercy for a man who showed none. The families of the victims were stunned. They never received an apology. Never got closure. Today, Dwight Loving sits in a federal prison. No sunlight. No freedom. No way out. He's not a soldier anymore. Not a killer on the loose. Just a number. a name in a file. But his story remains a stain on the military. A reminder that sometimes the uniform hides something far darker. Number 2. Calvin Gibbs, the soldier who hunted for fun. Calvin Gibbs wasn't new to war. He'd already done a tour in Iraq. He was strong, confident, and smart. But behind that perfect salute was a man with a chilling hobby. He liked power. He liked control. And he liked watching others fear him. In 2009, he was assigned to the 5th Striker Brigade. His mission? Help stabilize Afghan villages. His secret mission? Something much darker. It started with a sick idea. Gibbs told his men, "We can kill whoever we want. Just make it look like combat." At first, the soldiers thought he was joking. But then he pulled out a bag of weapons, old grenades, AK-47s, and enemy guns. He called it his kill kit. With these weapons, he said, they could plant evidence on bodies after the murder. And no one would ask questions. It happened in January 2010, in a village called La Mohammed Karlari. A young Afghan farmer was walking near his home. He wasn't armed. He wasn't threatening. But that didn't matter. Gibbs gave the order. One soldier tossed a grenade. Another opened fire. They killed the man. Then, they placed a rifle by his body. And smiled for photos. It was murder, disguised as war. And worse, it worked. No one questioned the kill. So they did it again. As the murders continued, the horror deepened. Calvin Gibbs began cutting off fingers from the victims. He called them trophies. He kept the bones in a box. Showed them to other soldiers like they were prizes. He laughed about it. He bragged about it. The other soldiers, some scared, some sickened, felt trapped. But a few followed him. Narrator. By spring, the group had a name. They were known in whispers as the Kill Team. At least 3 innocent civilians were murdered this way. All staged to look like combat kills. All covered up with the help of Gibbs' weapons. One victim was just 15 years old. He was unarmed. Standing in a field. When they shot him and posed for pictures beside the body. When other soldiers grew uncomfortable, Gibbs threatened them. He said if anyone snitched, they'd end up just like the villagers. Some soldiers stayed silent out of fear. Others joined him. They took drugs, laughed, and shared stories of the kills like they were video game scores. This wasn't war. This was a hunting game. And Gibbs was the leader. But secrets don't stay buried forever. One soldier, SPC Justin Stoner, complained about drug use in the unit. He didn't even mention the murders, just the drugs. But that was enough. Gibbs found out. And beat him. Badly. But Stoner fought back, not with fists. But with truth. He told investigators everything. Names. Details. Killings. Photos. And trophies. The army launched a full investigation. In November 2011, the case reached court. America watched in disbelief as the details came out. Finger bones in bags. Photos of smiling soldiers beside mutilated bodies. Lies. Threats. Jokes. Gibbs never showed remorse. He called the victims savages. Said they deserved it. The courtroom fell silent. He was found guilty of 3 counts of premeditated murder and many other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with a chance of parole after 20 years. Calvin Gibbs wasn't alone. 11 other soldiers were also charged. Some were given short sentences. Others confessed and turned witnesses. But none were seen as dangerous as Gibbs. He was the brain. The manipulator. The killer in charge. One soldier said, "He made war feel like a sport." And we were all caught in the game. The case left a scar on the US military. It raised big questions. How many more war crimes go unnoticed? How many more soldiers are living with fear and guilt? How far will one man go when he feels above the law? The victims' families never got justice. Not really. Their sons and brothers were called benemies. But they were farmers. Teenagers. Fathers. They were humans. Not targets. Number 3. Ryan G. Anderson, the soldier who tried to join Al-Qaeda. In 2004, the United States was deep in the war on terror. Troops were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Terror cells were hiding everywhere. And tension was sky high. In the middle of it all stood a quiet man named Ryan G. Anderson. He wasn't loud. He wasn't violent. He didn't even seem angry. He was a specialist in the Washington National Guard. And his job? He was a tank crew member. He had top-level clearance. He understood US military operations. And most of all, he was trusted. But inside, Ryan was living a double life. Ryan Anderson was born into a Christian family. But later in life, he converted to Islam. That wasn't the problem. The US military supports freedom of religion. But something changed. Ryan became obsessed, not with peace, but with radical beliefs. He began posting messages in Islamic extremist chat rooms. Messages offering to help Al-Qaeda. He said he could give them maps of military bases, tactics to destroy tanks, and information on US troop movements. He said he was a Muslim inside the military, ready to help take it down from within. But Ryan wasn't talking to Al-Qaeda. Not really. He was talking to undercover FBI agents. For weeks, they let him speak. Let him share his hatred. Let him reveal every dark thought. They pretended to be Al-Qaeda fighters. And Ryan believed them. He told them he could kill American soldiers. He told them where US tanks were weak. He even offered training to help them ambush American patrols. Narrator whispers. He was ready to kill his brothers in uniform. On February 12, 2004, Ryan went to meet his new terrorist brothers in person. He didn't know they were FBI agents. He didn't know they were wearing wires. He didn't know it was a sting operation. He walked into the hotel room, carrying documents and diagrams. He sat down. He smiled. And then, the agent stood up, guns drawn, and arrested him on the spot. The traitor was caught. The army did not take this lightly. Ryan Anderson was court-martialed at Fort Lewis, Washington. The charge? Aiding the enemy during wartime. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. Prosecutors showed the online chats, the documents, the recordings, and Ryan's own voice talking about killing Americans. He didn't deny it. He said he wanted to help those who suffer under America's bombs. He said God was on his side. But the court saw it differently. In September 2004, the jury found Ryan G. Anderson guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of parole. He became the first American soldier in the war on terror to be convicted of trying to aid the enemy. He was 26 years old. For many in the military, Ryan's betrayal hurt worse than bullets. He wasn't just a traitor. He was one of them. He wore the same boots, ate the same meals, carried the same flag. And still, he turned. One fellow soldier said, "It's like finding a bomb in your own backpack. You never see it coming." Today, Ryan Anderson lives in a high-security federal prison. No internet. No more secret messages. No more pretending. He's a forgotten man. No more headlines. No more missions. Just long, slow days in a cell. He once dreamed of helping a terror group. Now, he can't even help himself. Ryan Anderson's story raised haunting questions. How did he get so far without being caught? Were there others like him? Can we ever really know who stands beside us? And the biggest question of all. What turns a soldier into a traitor? There's no easy answer. But one thing is certain. Not all enemies come from outside the gates. Some are already inside. Number 4. John E. Hatley, the sergeant who ordered desert execution. John Hatley was a hero, at least, that's what they thought. He'd served in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Iraq. He earned a Bronze Star and was respected by soldiers under his command. He was tough, focused, and loyal to his team. But over time, something in him began to crack. Iraq wasn't a clean war. And Hatley was getting tired of the rules. He started saying things like, "These detainees are just going to go free anyway. Why bother bringing them in?" And then one night, he stopped asking questions. He gave an order no soldier should ever give. It was March 2007, Baghdad. Hatley and his men were on patrol. They captured 4 Iraqi men suspected of attacking US forces. The men had weapons, but no clear proof tied them to any attack. Still, Hatley didn't trust the system. He feared that if they handed the men over, they'd be released. And back to planting bombs the next day. So instead of taking them to headquarters, he made a different plan. He told his team, "We'll take care of it ourselves." They drove the 4 detainees out into a quiet area. Near a canal, away from buildings, away from cameras, and away from command. The men were handcuffed. Blindfolded. They had no idea what was coming. Then, under the stars, in the still air of the Iraqi night, Hatley gave the order. One by one, the men were led to the edge of the canal and shot in the head. One soldier said, "They dropped like sacks of potatoes. Then their bodies were pushed into the water. Gone. No trace. No paperwork. No photos. No evidence. It was like it never happened." Hatley and his men swore to keep it secret. They destroyed the radio logs. They never reported the killings. And they returned to base, as if nothing had happened. For over a year, no one knew. No questions were asked. But secrets, especially ones soaked in blood, never stay buried forever. In 2008, rumors started swirling. A young soldier who served under Hatley couldn't live with the guilt. He told another soldier. That soldier told a chaplain. The chaplain told the Army Criminal Investigation Division, CID. And just like that, the cover-up started to fall apart. CID launched a full-scale probe. They interviewed soldiers. They searched for evidence. But without bodies. They had no crime scene. No bullets. No fingerprints. Still, witnesses spoke. One soldier said, "We killed them. I helped dig the holes." Others described the exact location. Even the hand signals Hatley gave when it was time to shoot. The case was building. And it was building fast. In 2009, First Sergeant John Hatley faced a military court-martial. He was charged with premeditated murder, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. The courtroom was tense. Hatley still wore his uniform, his chest full of medals. But his eyes showed something else. Fear. Prosecutors painted him as a leader who lost his moral compass. A man who chose vigilante justice over military law. The defense argued there was no physical evidence. No bodies. No bullets. But the words of fellow soldiers were enough. In April 2009, the court reached its decision. Guilty. Hatley was sentenced to life in prison, later reduced to 40 years. But even that wasn't the end. Because this wasn't just about one man. It was about the system. And about how war can twist right and wrong. John Hatley's case became part of a bigger story. A group known as the Leavenworth 10. 10 U.S. soldiers sentenced to harsh punishments for war crimes during Iraq and Afghanistan. Some people saw them as criminals. Others saw them as scapegoats, punished for doing what they thought was right in the fog of war. Families protested. Petitions spread. Politicians weighed in. But the military held firm. Hatley would stay behind bars. In 2020, after serving over a decade, Hatley was granted parole. He walked out of prison quietly. No camera crews. No press conference. Just silence. Some saw it as a second chance. Others saw it as unfinished justice. But the memories of that night, the quiet canal, the terrified detainees, the shots that echoed in the dark, they will never go away. Number 5. Edward Kelly, the Marine who planned to kill the FBI. Edward Kelly served in the United States Marine Corps. He was trained, tough, and knew how to follow orders. He didn't see action overseas. But he carried the pride of a warrior. After his military service, Kelly moved back home to Tennessee. To friends and neighbors, he was quiet, even polite. But inside, something was burning. He grew angry. He grew paranoid. And worst of all, he began to hate the system he once served. In 2020, federal agents got a tip. Kelly had been illegally stockpiling weapons. Guns. Ammo. Explosives. He was arrested. But it didn't stop there. The FBI discovered he had ties to extremist groups. He was angry at the government. He believed violence was the answer. In 2022, he was convicted and sentenced to house arrest while awaiting further trial. He wasn't in prison. He was back in his neighborhood. Watching. Waiting. And planning something terrifying. Narrator. Federal agents searched his home. Inside, they found a list. A list of names. FBI agents. Law enforcement officers. Government employees. And at the top of that list was the FBI agent who had arrested him. They also found hand-drawn maps, home addresses, security layouts. This wasn't random. This was organized. Kelly had created a kill list. He wasn't just angry. He was ready to go to war. But Kelly didn't plan this alone. He recruited a friend. A young man named Austin Carter. Carter wasn't military. But he listened. And he followed. Kelly told him they were going to storm the homes of FBI agents. Kill them in their sleep. And send a message to the government. They planned every step. Entry points. Escape routes. Weapons. Timing. They believed they were starting a revolution. But like many dark plots, this one leaked. Someone close to Kelly heard whispers. A neighbor noticed unusual activity. A tip made its way to the FBI. Immediately, the Bureau launched an emergency surveillance operation. They tracked his messages, watched his movements, and waited until they had everything they needed. Then, one morning in late 2022, agents moved in. Edward Kelly was arrested outside his home. He was carrying documents, maps, and a small loaded weapon. Austin Carter was arrested shortly after. When agents searched Kelly's house, they found more weapons, tactical gear, homemade explosives, and the full hit list with FBI names and personal info. The FBI called it a full-blown domestic terrorist plot. Kelly and Carter were charged with conspiracy to murder federal officials, Interstate threats. Illegal possession of firearms and explosives. Attempted domestic terrorism. If successful, the plan could have sparked nationwide panic. It could have cost lives. And it would have come not from foreign enemies, but from inside American neighborhoods. In court, Edward Kelly showed no remorse. He said he believed the government was evil. He said violence was the only way to wake people up. The judge didn't flinch. The jury didn't hesitate. Guilty. Edward Kelly was sentenced to life in federal prison. No parole. No deals. No mercy. Carter was sentenced to 25 years. News of the plot shocked the nation. A former Marine Corps veteran had tried to assassinate FBI agents. Not in the heat of battle, but in cold blood. From inside American soil. This wasn't a battlefield. This was terrorism. The FBI raised its internal security. And communities across Tennessee and the nation began to wonder. How many more Edward Kellys are out there?